everybody. Welcome to Two Up the First. Great to have you here. It is January the 13th, 2025. I'm Ryan Balgi. Thanks for being here. We've got plenty to talk about today. I was in the Bahamas for the last several days talking about the Corn Ferry Tour event down there. It's still ongoing right now, Sunday through Wednesday. We'll touch on that just for a little bit. Then we're going to talk about Sergio Garcia being banned, at least currently, from being a Ryder Cup captain thanks to a 2018 rule that was never meant to think about live golf. And we're going to talk about Nick Taylor being perhaps the greatest playoff golfer on the PGA Tour, winning at the Sony Open in Hawaii. And then we're going to wrap up everything looking at potential TGL expansion talk that's already being done. Kind of crazy. I just came back from the Bahamas yesterday. I went there on Friday, came in, we played the Pro-Am on Saturday, shot a bunch of footage for the first couple of episodes of the Road to French Lick series that we did with the French Lick Resort. Brendan Sweeney, my co-host, was there. We played the Pro-Am. We had two great pros in Patrick Cover and Dan McCarthy. Lots and lots of fun. Had a bunch of players as well. Had a blast with them too. Atlantis is a beautiful property. If you ever get the chance, please go back. Or I'm going to go back with my family. But if you ever get the chance, check it out. The Ocean Club's a lot of fun. The event is on through Wednesday. So second round today. We almost had a 59 yesterday. A birdie away from a 59 to start the year on the Corn Ferry Tour. Good luck, fellas. And it was a great time. So I had a 20-hour day yesterday, almost a 21-hour day, getting back from the Bahamas, going to Miami, then had like a 12-hour layover, cancellations, crazy stuff. Wound up getting back home at about 12:15 in the morning, just after the Commanders had won their playoff game. People going nuts on the metro, in a train car, people just screaming. It was great. So plenty to talk about today, as mentioned. Let's start with Sergio Garcia. So Sergio is back on the DP World Tour. He's a member once again of the DP World Tour. If you will recall, when he went to live, just like all the other players that went to live, there was a series of fines levied against those players from the DP World Tour because they played in events that weren't sanctioned, that weren't allowed by the DP World Tour membership agreement. And so they basically were fined in the area of 75, 100,000. I forget what the exact number is these days, but close to a six-figure sum per event, where if they went and played that live event, then they got the fine, right? And also, most of those players, some of them at least, chose to remove themselves from the membership because they weren't going to play DP World Tour events. They'd gotten the money from live. They weren't feeling welcome at DP World Tour events. So they're like, well, forget it. I'm not going to be a member. Well, Sergio kind of had a change of heart. World's changed a little bit. Maybe there's negotiations happening between the Saudis and the DP World Tour about some kind of back and forth. We still don't know where that stands. There's rumors of Tom McKibben going to play on live next year. Well, now this year. And he kind of didn't really do anything to quell those last week at the Team Cup event where he participated and said, well, I'm not going to talk about that here. But he also has a PGA Tour card, by the way, because he was in the 10 eligible players to, quote unquote, graduate from the DP World Tour after last season. So maybe there's something there. Well, I don't know, but Sergio has come back and he's settled whatever fine issues there were. And he's going to try and make the Ryder Cup team, which, hey, that's up to him. I mean, he has an opportunity kind of to do that because he can maybe play enough DP World Tour events. Maybe he does really well in the handful he can go play before the cutoff, and maybe he gets in on DP World Tour points or, that system of qualifying. Or maybe it all kind of works out and he has a great year in, plays the Masters really well and then somehow handles the business in the, getting into the majors, and that works out. I mean, it's a gambit, right? Or he could just be a captain's pick, right? I mean, we've got them now, and Luke Donald has plenty at his disposal to round out his team. So they're good buddies over the years. You just pick them, right? You just got to be a DP World Tour member. However, thanks to a rule that came in for the 2018 season, Sergio can never be the Ryder Cup captain, at least with the rules that are currently constructed. So back in the day, before the thought of live ever being a thing, or the Super Golf League, or the Saudi Golf League, or the Premier Golf League, or any of those concepts that were the names of what turned out to be live golf, the DP World Tour, which was then the European Tour, said, well, we don't want our best players to not play our tour in off years for the Ryder Cup. We want our best players to be patronizing our tour and playing in events each and every year. And so we don't want to give the players an opportunity to go play a full PGA Tour season with no consequence in an off year, and then come back and be a member in Ryder Cup years, and then play our tour because you have to satisfy membership requirements. And so they created a couple of different things. They changed the rules of membership. So they said, now you have to play 4 European Tour only events in a given year to maintain membership. And that meant you couldn't, the majors didn't count. The WGCs of the time, which were still around, did not count. You had to play 4 DP World Tour, well, we're now DP World Tour originals to be able to maintain that membership. And then they threw in this additional caveat. And they said, if you ever want to be the Ryder Cup captain for the European side, you cannot, for any reason, let your membership lapse. So you have to maintain your membership every year throughout your career if you want to be the captain. And if you let it lapse at all for any reason, you can't. And Sergio Garcia, among several others, Westwood and Poulter and Stenson, they're not playing DP World Tour events. They're not maintaining their membership. So they have effectively disqualified themselves from being the European Ryder Cup captain ever again. And Sergio knows that. Luke Donald knows that. He actually brought it up, talking about it. So the potential there is you could change the rules, right? You could just rewrite the rules. They do it all the time, right? PGA Tour rewrote the rules of membership, had a vote. It's different now. You can do the same thing on the DP World Tour. And so I'm not saying this is a permanent ban for Sergio Garcia from the captaincy. And I do think even if the rules did change, depending on what happens between the PGA Tour, the Saudis, and the DP World Tour, in whatever form of negotiation they take, whatever deals they wind up with, the sentiment could change over time as well, right? You could go, oh, well, we all made mistakes. Sergio, you should be a captain. We all made mistakes. Lee Westwood get a turn. We all made mistakes. All right, Stenson, why don't you be captain now? But at the same time, we're also kind of starting to get to an interesting point where Rory McIlroy's not that far from 40, right? He's probably the one guy you're going to absolutely make sure is a captain. But you've got Justin Rose sitting out there. You've got Shane Lowry out there. Those guys absolutely love it. You've got Tommy Fleetwood out there. You've got Francesco Molinari out there. You've got a good solid 5 guys that are going to want to be captain, if not multiple time captain, if it goes well, in the not too distant future. So the window for a live player who might either come back or has already come back to DP World Tour membership, if they were to even change the rule, is pretty small, because those players, in my estimation, both politically and in terms of resume, are going to get more deference from the DP World Tour and the other 2 organizations affiliated with the British PGA, PGA of Europe, that come into this, that control Ryder Cup Europe. They're going to give more deference to those players because of their loyalty and sticking with the DP World Tour to be future captains. And frankly, the resumes are better than your Westwoods, your Poulters, your Stensons, your Garcias. I mean, Stenson and Garcia obviously got major championships. But I still think at the end of the day, this window is very, very short to be a potential captain for those players. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle in all of this, even if you wind up changing the rules. There really isn't that rule, at least as best I can tell, that doesn't exist on the PGA of America side. They really tend to prefer their champions, right, or the best ever. So hypothetically, I guess Phil could be a Ryder Cup captain someday, right? Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, those guys could be Ryder Cup captains someday. That's not prohibited. There's no connection between PGA Tour membership directly and PGA of America status to be a Ryder Cup captain. So that doesn't exist on the American side. But the reason this all came along was to make sure that their best players didn't just kind of take up 1 year of membership at a time and then throw the then European Tour into this position where every other year they had a lackluster schedule, that all the best players would just go to the PGA Tour, play the full season, they come back and take up the membership, and then in the intervening year, the depth of the tour was not good at all. And that was a very smart move on their part, because even though Rory McIlroy threatened to not take up DP World Tour membership for 2019, Keith Pelley was then the chief executive. Now it's Guy Kinnings. He made sure that McIlroy remained a member. Like, he made a personal appeal to him. He went visit him, talked to him. Apparently was convincing enough. And Rory McIlroy never let his membership lapse. And the interesting thing is, looking back on it, because I was rereading the stories the last couple of days that we wrote at the time, McIlroy was saying, oh, well, I'm just going to skip membership for 2019 and I'll come back for 2020. And man, that would have been pretty messed up because then he wouldn't have been a member in 19. And with the world kind of falling apart in 2020, he wouldn't have satisfied the requirements. There's no way he would have done that. So he wouldn't have been a member in 19, 20, maybe even 21, or depending on how that went. He might not have been able to play in that Ryder Cup in 21, the one where, kind of sobbed at Whistling Straits and got all emotional about it. And the Americans thrashed them. And that kind of led to some soul searching on their side, which then led to 23, which was a total butt whipping on the American side. So that timeline is super interesting. But anyhow, so Garcia is back. We'll see what happens. I think the best outcome for him is a captain's pick, really. But you've got Rahm in the field, you've got Hatton in the field. On the American side, you've got Patrick Reed, you've got Adrian Meronk. You got a bunch of live players competing this week. And if McKibben winds up with the rumors being true, him being part of live golf, then he's another live golf player that'll be starting on their tour in 4 weeks, 3 weeks when they started the season in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. All right, let's get into the Sony Open in Hawaii, which I watched a bunch of the finish on the airplane. Well, the playoff finish on the airplane, not the total finish. I was in TGI Fridays in the Miami airport for that back half of the round. But YLA delivers once again. The Sony Open in Hawaii went to a playoff for the 6th year in the last 10 played. There's no other tournament on the PGA Tour that gets anywhere near that. Every single year, there's a threatening of a playoff. Most of the time, apparently, it does go to a playoff. And that makes for a compelling finish, even though you might not have great names every year. Some years you have great names, some years you don't. Some years you have superstars, some years you have guys that people like us who watch a lot of golf love. And we get Nick Taylor, we get Nico Echeverria, we have JJ Spawn, we have Steven Jaeger, right? So guys, 3 of them in their 30s, mid-30s, late 30s in some respect, I guess, for Taylor. But then you've got Echeverria, who's just kind of starting to come into his own. I think somehow convinced himself of whatever he found in the fall that he can be an elite golfer on this tour. And I think he's demonstrated he's got that capacity. But those guys were playing ahead. It didn't look like either Taylor or Echeverria were going to be anywhere near the playoff in the end. It seemed destined, if anything, it would be Spawn and Jaeger. And those guys stumble hard down the stretch. Winning's hard. Harry Hall stumbled. It gets nervy out there when it's time to win. And you're also playing a Seth Rayner course, which plays as a par 70, is one of the shortest courses on tour, and yet still delivers these close results every year. You get to 18, which should be, in the player's mind, an absolute gimme of a birdie, if not an eagle opportunity. And you get Jaeger, who takes less than driver, still tries to kind of cut off the dog leg for some reason, winds up in the bunker, doesn't get into the playoff. Neither him nor Spawn get into the playoff. And then you wind up with Nico and Nick playing 18 twice to determine the champion. They birdie both the first time around, and then Taylor's the guy who does the job right with a birdie again on the second hole. Now he is a 5-time PGA Tour winner. And if you had told Nick Taylor that 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, you'd have been laughed out of the room because he was not playing great golf. It seemed like whatever he had left was kind of a maintain at best status on the PGA Tour. A bunch of seasons just kind of hanging around 120, 110, 105, that type of number on the points list. And he was just kind of hanging in there. And then he wins the Canadian Open kind of out of nowhere. Then he goes and wins the Phoenix Open in a playoff. After the Phoenix Open, he did not have another top 10 finish for the remainder of last season. So 6 or 7 months of just bad golf, really bad golf. And then he comes here and he wins again. And in totality, that's 3 wins in 39 starts. And there are not many players on the PGA Tour currently who can make that kind of claim. Handful, maybe? So in terms of getting it done when you have the opportunity, Nick Taylor's an all-timer, man. He's 3-0 in playoffs. He is the first player since Bubba Watson to win in a PGA Tour playoff in 3 consecutive seasons. Bubba did it in 2010, 2011, and 2012. And he's Taylor, the first guy to do it since then. So that's a rare company of club. Not necessarily one you want to be in. I mean, there are half dozen guys in that group that, since the kind of modern record keeping of the tour, that have won in a playoff, sudden death playoff in 3 consecutive seasons on the PGA Tour. That's cool for Taylor. I mean, if you get to extra holes with him, it's apparently over. and very, very cool for him to get the win. Stinks for Echeverria. I mean, he's been playing great golf, and I think he took a lot of confidence from it. Just hearing his comments after the fact, he knows he can put himself there. He knows he can be an elite golfer on this tour. He has demonstrated that with what he did at the Zozo Championship, which is now the Bay Current Classic, the Japan event. And notching that win there, I think, helped him out a lot. He has played well to start the year. He is an interesting player to look at for the Amex this week. Now we move off of the Hawaiian Islands and we get into the mainland United States, the California desert, and Palm Springs. You've got the American Express this week, 156 player field, 3-course rotation, 2 of PGA West, the host stadium course, the Pete Dye, the Nicholas Tournament course, and then you've got La Quinta Country Club rounding out that rotation. Par 72 for all 3 of them. The last several years, when we've seen a 59 at La Quinta, you can threaten 59 on this golf course at La Quinta. Not so much the PGA West courses, but you can go low on them. It's stadium golf, as I believe I would give the credit to Todd Lewis for that term, where it's just kind of perfect, right? The conditions are incredible. Every surface is running pure. There's hardly any wind. It's beautiful. It's temperate. It's not particularly difficult to play, which means you got to go play about as close to bogey-free golf as you can. Looking at like 25 under to win. You're going to get 1 round on each of the first 3 courses, or the 3 host courses. Then they're going to make a cut for the final round of the top 65 in ties. That comes back to the PGA West Stadium course, and then that's where everything gets wrapped up. Nick Dunlap is the defending champion. He earned exactly $0 by winning this event last year as an amateur, becoming the first player since Phil Mickelson in 1991 to win on the PGA Tour. Then he wound up winning as a professional later on in the year out at Tahoe, so a couple wins in California for him. He became the first player in PGA Tour history to win as an amateur and a professional in the same season. Had a nice week last week at Sony, so this should be interesting for him to come back to his first title defense and all the emotions that probably came about after that 3rd round last year, potentially winning and then going, wait, I don't need to be a college student anymore. I can go play professional golf. And the kind of cavalcade that happened afterward for him of just monumentally bad golf, trying to get used to being a touring professional, being thrust into it kind of out of nowhere, well, really out of nowhere, then starting to figure it out, then getting a win, then starting to be a world-class golfer that still has a lot of variance in him, but seems to be on the right track. Good week at Sony. So that'll be a good week for him, I think, to kind of reminisce on how quickly his life changed in the last 12 months. While Scotty Scheffler is not here, he had a WD with a continuing recovery from that hand surgery. You still got a good field. You got Xander Schauffele, who was close here last year, along with Justin Thomas. Those were the 2 guys that really threatened. Christian Bezuidenhout actually wound up getting the winner's share of this event last year by finishing in solo 2nd. Good history here. Sungjae Im, a good history here. Got Patrick Cantlay in the field, Wyndham Clark in the field. Basically 20 of the world top 50 competing this week. Should be a solid field. I know over the years, a lot of people complained about the Pro-Am event, the Pro-Am portion of this event, kind of taking away from the tournament. And since Amex has gotten involved, and I think they've kind of changed the access to the Pro-Am portion of that, the networking has maybe become different, better. I don't know what the right term is, but the quality of amateur partners is a little bit different. And that's gotten more of those top 25, top 50 players to come in and play. I mean, you had Ron patronizing this tournament, won this tournament when he was still on the PGA Tour. You got Scheffler part of it. You've got Schauffele part of it. You got Cantlay part of it. Tony Finau's part of it. You've kind of found some names who like coming to this tournament, and that has helped it out quite a bit. Be very curious to see what's the more compelling tournament of the week, because this is really the first comparison opportunity of the year between the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour. And back before LIV was ever a thing, weeks like this were kind of interesting because you might get a slightly worse field a few years ago for this event where maybe you had about the same number of top 50 players. You got about 10 of them in Dubai this week. So you've got a better field at the Amex, but Dubai's got a better purse by $200,000. Smaller field over there. I would say Emirates Golf Club's a better course than PGA West on the stadium, but it's probably a push. So it's an interesting week to have that. We also have the PGA Tour champions back, by the way, at the Mitsubishi Electric Classic at Hualai. And I want to throw in a quick plug for our LPGA group on X called the LPGA 6. We do gambling picks, betting picks each week for the LPGA, and over at golfnewsnet.com for the first time this year, we are going to do LPGA tournament models and a database of results and strokes gained. So we're going to make that available for members. It really is, if you're into such things, if you're into betting on golf in any fashion, the LPGA does not get a whole lot of love, and it's a market with a lot of great value. So we're going to start offering that over at golfnewsnet.com. Let's round up everything today with something from Josh Carpenter, who I feel like I talk about his work probably too often because it's not my work, and he's tremendous over at Sports Business Journal. He's your ratings guy. He's your business moves guy. I mean, he does a fabulous job on the beat. And he came out today with a couple of good pieces. One, a conversation with Mark Lazarus about the future of Golf Channel, golf media, which me in my capacity, I find that a fascinating read. But also some kind of a piece with thoughts that he's hearing. Live is already looking at, or not Live, excuse me. TGL is already looking at expanding its footprint. They're looking at potentially building more arenas, more venues. So SoFi Center in different cities, apparently looking at Vegas or maybe Phoenix, kind of some warm weather cities to potentially have these venues built, maybe some expansion teams, and maybe expanding the players who are eligible to play, potentially bringing in live golf players or players outside of professional golf. So celebrities, influencer types, maybe having them participate. I think that is an interesting idea. Let's take the player part first. There was feedback, especially from the premier, that, hey, I'd love to see kind of normal people, so to speak, participate in this in some fashion, if not to kick out the pros entirely, which that's not going to happen. But it might be kind of interesting to have a mixed team lineup where you had one pro from the PGA Tour, one LPGA Tour pro, and one normie, a influencer, a celebrity that's a low handicap, whatever, and they play as the team. And then you can have that as a lineup one week. You can require players to have, or require teams to have that lineup. Or then one week, maybe you have all PGA Tour pros. One week you have all LPGA Tour pros. There's different ways that you can do this. Could be really fascinating. And there is already kind of a clamoring for expansion franchises in TGL, which I heard from a couple of different folks about the process to bid for these teams. And this is guys in the 9-figure club, multiple comma club in their net worth, if not the 3 comma club, battling it out for the rights to these franchises, getting well into the 8 figures. And that's a pretty incredible sum of money for something that didn't exist, got postponed a year, and no one has any idea of how well it's going to work 6 weeks from now. But that's where this is. And sports as an investment has grown obviously so much with the growth of the value of NFL teams, Major League Baseball franchises, NHL teams, NBA teams, you name it. I mean, all of those, NWSL has grown a ton. WNBA has grown a ton. I mean, the valuations associated with these teams are just skyrocketing over from 5 years ago. So those opportunities aren't as much of a value and aren't as available as they once were. Getting a TGL franchise for 30, 40, $50 million in the first run was probably a potentially decent value if this does well. That next batch isn't going to cost that. It's going to cost 80, 90, $100 million if they want to expand this league, which they absolutely could do if they add additional venues. And you don't have to have a venue for every home team, although I'm sure they would love that. But then you could start to kind of turn that into a little bit of a business model unto itself. And I think the wheels are spinning here. There's a lot that could be going on with TGL, but week 2 of TGL is on Tuesday. Tiger makes his debut for his Jupiter Lynx team. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that goes, what the viewership numbers are, experiences, compared to that first week with the Bay. Just smashing off New York Golf Club to make it maybe not as compelling of a match as they'd like, but a great debut from a viewership standpoint. That's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. I appreciate it. Back with a full week of shows this week. Make sure you catch our episodes of The Press on GNN TV as well as our social channels. Consider subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Our app for Roku should be available this week, which is great. We're going to have that out there. Please download that. Get that onto your device. You'll be able to watch GNN TV live 24/7, as well as all of our content on demand over on our Roku app, as well as at golfnewsnet.com. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you next time on Two at the First. Have a great day.